really wanted to get away to a place where nobody recognized his face. And what he didn't know was that time was already over. It was already too late to go anywhere where he would not be known.
Yeah, once at Barristers he talked about that he had just been on the phone with his mom, and that his mom said she had searched him on the internet and found out, and sort of told Jeff what he was doing. So I think that made Jeff really aware of the lack of privacy, because his mom was sort of recounting his life back to him that she'd read off the internet. So he realized that people were sort of taking notes on his life and posting them to the world.
His mythology could have only ended in one way, which is the way it ended, because of the path he was on. And that's sad, and I think my delusion was that I could do something about that, because that was also something I had a sense of from the first moment that I met him.
His voice was an instrument evoking reverie, a pure nature, beautiful things. It was magisterial like a pipe organ, yet natural like the northern lights. Jeff's voice made me want to build shrines, and I realize now that Jeff Buckley was a shrine to his voice.
When I was filming Jeff on tour, really the videotape that I did of him was really a sort of side thing. I was really there to photograph, but I just bought a handy cam, and so it was really like just doing home movies.
Go on. So did you make it out of the airport? Everything done okay? If you follow me, stepping out into the night, into LA.
After a while, they sort of became like a bunch of big brothers to me on the bus, which was a really wonderful feeling, because they really accepted me into their road family, and really allowed me to do what I wanted to. Except they would pick on me a lot, I have to say. Because I was basically the only girl on the whole stinky bus of guys, and they all smelled all the time. They were always dirty, and yeah, they would pick on me.
You big whopper, you with your camera, you whopper.
What does that mean?
You're a big black whopper.
I had known Jeff like a year and a half, 2 years before we ever played music together. We just would take walks and eat together, and listen to music and go hear music, and I would go hear him. And then he asked me to audition, and I got there, and I didn't have a strap for my guitar. I wasn't used to playing guitar standing up. I usually just did it sitting down in my house. So he got me a strap, but I still sat down.
he's never played guitar before this band, or he's played guitar, but he's like never been in a band before, so he's totally starting from scratch. That was pretty cool.
And once the record came out, you know, I think it hit like a certain amount of success, and in Europe and places like France and stuff, it like got like popular really quickly, and we went there a bunch, and that was really exciting to experience, like, you know, audiences like that were really ravenous and like felt a lot more pagan than ritualistic, and like people were fainting because it was so hot, and like, you know, it had this other energy that was good, and I think everyone in the band fed off that.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Music Faucet here at WFMU. Tonight, a very special evening. Gary Lucas and Jeff Buckley comprise Gods and Monsters.
Jeff was like such a hilarious comedian and an amazing mimic. And one of the things that might get lost with people who didn't, you know, who only knew him through his records was his sense of humor in concert. You know, he might, you know, some of his more indulgent solo performances before he went on tour with the band were just, you know, comedy acts almost. I mean, he was that on, you know, he was always just such an incredible wit. But he was just a funny guy, and he could, like, you know, pick up anything, you know, do like Smells Like Teen Spirit or like whatever the top hit of the day was.
Sometimes I feel like I don't have a card. Sometimes I feel like I don't have a pen. The city I live in, the city of angel, known yet I am.
Or a Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, you know, 15-minute song he memorized word for word. Anyway, he did this song, which is a Screamin' Jay Hawkins song, Alligator Wine, which was pretty funny.
Take the blood out of an alligator. Take the left eye out of a fish. Take the skin out of a frog. Or mix it all up in a dish. Add a cup of greens for water. And then count from 1 to 9. Right over your left shoulder, and you got alligator wine. Alligator wine. Your first.
She doesn't want a pony.
I promise.
I met Jeff a few times, I guess. before I felt like I really had met him. He was really capable of connecting. When he was present, he was really present. So he made you feel like you had known him for 150 years and that you were the most important person in his world at that time. He had this just phenomenal gift in that way. There was one time that was fantastic where I was playing in Chennai and he stood, I guess he was particularly up that night, and he stood, like everybody else was standing, but he stood like 4 feet from the stage and just occasionally would make eye contact with me, but, effectively stood there like this beacon of support and just sort of would be like, the entire time. And then the minute I put the guitar down, jumped into my arms and made me carry him around and stuff. I mean, he was very, playful like that. That was, great. I mean, that way of his generosity in that way was just like no one else I've ever encountered.
Chennai was fantastic, but it was a very distracted kind of a place. It was really a coffee shop, and people would come and look in the windows, and so he came here. He came over to meet me one day, and he wanted to check out the room before he would agree to play. It was 8 years ago, so he was very young. I'm not sure how old he was, but it was something like 24, maybe even younger, but he was young, and he was pretty green too. I thought he was really amusing because he knew how great he was, even though there were only 30 or 40 people coming to see him at the time. But he knew that he was very special, I think. And he liked the room enough. We had lunch together that day, and then he played here about once a month.
I think the reason he really wanted me to photograph wasn't just a matter of whether I was talented. It was about the way in which I saw him. I mean, I love Jeff very much, and I think, but through the photography, he had a reason for choosing me, that it was really obvious the way I felt about him, I think, in the work that I did. And he wanted to be portrayed with that loving eye, with a certain lovingness. When I went on the tour with them, when I first got there, I think things were a little funky. I don't know if I can really talk about that much, but I think that they were all very tired from being on the road. And so I think at that point they'd already been on the road for a year. I mean, they were on the road for a couple of years.
I think those 2 years on the road changed him a lot. His experiences with his record company and his manager, and I'm sure the experiences he had on the road were really changing him a little bit. He was less of a clown and more in need of a rest.
Well, there was a time when you let me know what's really going on below, but now you never show that to me, do you? Remember when I moved in you, and the holy dove was moving too, and every breath we drew was hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
ask me crazy questions like, you know, when he was all stressed out or something, he's like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, well, I go away and I take a rest and lie on a beach and read a book. And he's like, really? Really? Like, I mean, those kinds of things were things he didn't know how to do. And I think just very ordinary ways of taking care of himself, he was really bad at that. What got most of the attention was the mythological Jeff. On the other side, there was the regular guy who needed the same stuff everybody else needs, which is need to have like a safe place, a home, people that cared about him. Everything on one level was just about the work. It was about the work. That's what he did all the time. It was about the work, about the music. You know, I think he was really insecure also about why people liked him. Did they like him for who he was or what he did? And I think that was a very valid question for him to ask. I just looked at him as a person, not as sort of that iconographic, mythological beast, you know. I didn't like the mythological person so well because, you know, it really, I think it was so much at the expense of the person.
I knew I wanted to call him Scotty, but when it came time to name him, Scott Jeffrey did not sound as good as Jeffrey Scott. But I still called him Scotty anyway.
It was very funny to find that out, you know, that he really was Scotty Moorhead when he came to New York, and that name suits him so much more than Jeff Buckley. Knowing him, it was like, oh my God, that's who. And that's almost the difference between him on stage and that Jeff Buckley persona and the goofy clown who was really Scotty Moorhead. People wanted him desperately to be Jeff Buckley. I think it was really important for the people around him for him to be Jeff Buckley, because Jeff Buckley was a serious commodity.
I think he was conditioned by somebody to be a musician and a rock star. He was geared for that. He was trained to be that. I mean, at the same time, from the time he was a baby, from the time he was a weeny little baby, you know, somebody was stuffing guitars in his lap and stuff.
Well, as a little boy, he was very musical from the very beginning. You know, he played instruments, toy instruments in the beginning, but was always singing songs and reciting poetry. I believed very strongly in the Montessori message, so we put him in school when he was 2.5, so that he would have intellectual stimulation, and he just loved it.
I love you. And I'm afraid to love you.
He made a couple of attempts to move to New York, and I think the second time he went was actually caused by the invitation to go to perform at the Tim Buckley tribute at St. Anne's.
Sometimes I think about Saturday's child and all about the time when we were running wild. I've been a-searching for the dolphins in the sea.
And then
each and every one, there's always like son of ... That's been done into the ground, and then the comparisons, and then the blah blah blah. And maybe it's a combination of me being a kind of a boring artist, or kind of just. I mean, I have to cop to that if it's true. You know, why can't there be a bit more exciting language about the music? They all want to kill me and hurt me. They're all against me. I know. Because I'm perfect.
The problem is that he was following the same path, was very competitive with his dead father, always wanted to do better than him, but you have to understand too that he was also raised to be like that. That's how he was conditioned, to replace his father by his family or mother. I don't think you should put that in there. but I mean, so that he was conditioned to be like that, and he accepted that myth and fulfilled it and lived it out. And that, so with his father, everything he did had to do with his father, and yet even he himself, I mean, but also he got really freaking sick of everybody asking him about his father or comparing him to his father, but in reality, that was the thing he put forth.
The world's gone cold. No one cares about love anymore. What will you say when you see my face? Well, Father, do you know me? Do you know me? Did you even care? What will you say when you take my place?
He had phenomenal expectations of himself, you know, which I suppose are, just run a assumed parallel course often with someone with talent like that. And he was just worried about, the next record, and that people were going to forget him, things like that.
But as a performer and on stage, he put out everything, on a one-to-one basis. I wouldn't say he was unconditional.
And I can remember, hearing, from people that on certain days that he was feeling bad, and I'd ring him up and leave him a message, and he'd ring back to say thanks. But if he was in that place, he'd acknowledge, that you'd reached out and was very appreciative of it, but at the same time, didn't share a lot of that.
There was a lot at that point for him to get away from that he knew wasn't good for him. I know how much New York was not for him anymore, so I can only imagine that with going to Memphis and being able to write and not have to go anywhere and play music, and he had some friends there.
We all went down with Tom Verlaine, and we did some songs in the studio there, and it wasn't that we thought like, oh, this is awful or anything, but it wasn't what we had expected. We didn't, it didn't have the depth that we wanted. And a part of that also was that a lot of it wasn't finished, and Jeff felt like he had to really like take the time, be alone, and finish a lot of the songs.
The irony wasn't lost on anyone that a man who lived for his music would be found dead at the foot of Beale Street where he'd performed before. 30-year-old Jeff Buckley disappeared last week after a friend saw him jump into the Mississippi fully clothed. Despite several searches by police, it was a tourist on the American Queen ready to set sail on a cruise for St. Louis who finally spotted Buckley's body. No one wanted to talk on camera about Buckley or his music, which has been described as everything from folk to alternative pop to alternative jazz. Not only did Buckley make Memphis his home recently, he also had plans to cut his next album here. That won't happen now, and his friends say that's everybody's loss.
That was, yes, a phone call Thursday night at 9:05 California time. It was raining. I didn't get there until Friday, so they had stopped the search at dark that night and resumed the search at first light the next day. And it was raining, thunder and lightning when the plane came in. Really scary. But I thought, good, that's exactly how I feel. And all I packed was a t-shirt and a bathing suit, because I was quite sure that they were not looking in the right place, and so I was going to go jump in the river myself and find him. I was sure that all I had to do was go show them where to look. But that was just a dream.
I was in such a state of shock that I couldn't really make up my mind about like how I felt, like if he was dead or if he had maybe washed ashore like down the river. But then later that night I was like lying in his front yard or on the stones there and like in the driveway, and I like looked. I don't know, I was feeling the heaviness in the air and watching the clouds move, and the way it was just, everything was so thick, and the way like my heart felt, like I kind of sensed that he was dead. Yeah.
They were more ready to accept the facts than I clung to denial for another 24 hours. And then Mary Grace took me aside and said, it's not a rescue anymore.
On May 29, 1997, Jeff Buckley was swimming by this pylon here and disappeared. Him and a friend of his were down here waiting on his road manager, Gene Bowen, and the guys in the band to arrive from the airport. They were down here listening to a radio, and Jeff waded out in the water and decided to take him a little swim. And he was in the water singing, his friend was singing. A tugboat went by, and his friend picked the radio up, because the radio was on the edge of the water, picked the radio up so the water lamp and the shore wouldn't get the radio wet. When he turned around, Jeff was gone. No sight nor sound of him.
Once in a while, a man comes along. Even his failures were favorite songs. Oh, to have made something so unsurpassed, as certain things fall away, certain things last. Body goes down in the Mississippi water, weighted by a beauty, afraid of his light. Notify your holy men, console your sons and daughters, and tell me one more time, what is just, what is right?
It's very rare that you meet someone who is so ready to be so honest, so unpretentious, so unwilling to lie about anything, even if it protects them. That you knew that when Jeff was with you and looking in your eyes that there was no one more important to him than you at that moment, and that when he said he loved you, that was the strongest and truest love that could be loved. And that doesn't happen in this world, you know? That doesn't happen.
He wanted to be so there, so on, so giving, 24 hours a day. He really lived at a very intense pitch. I think that's why no one was surprised when they heard, not so much that he died, but the way that he died.
He was on a very specific path, just going one way. And, you know, I think that's also why I had a slightly conflicted relationship with him. I loved him very much, but I think I fought with him a lot because I didn't really agree with that viewpoint of, you know, going towards the abyss constantly, or, you know, that there was only one way out of this life or this direction.
This is a piece I wrote after Jeff drowned, and someone in his circle of friends asked me to put something together to share with some of the people who weren't here. I don't know if I knew Jeff Buckley. I knew a Jeff Buckley. I knew a cool-looking kid. I can't believe he was 30, a kid. I knew a cool-looking kid who put on a green thrift shop suit with white buck shoes and a hat just to walk a few houses up this small Memphis street we shared to come have dinner. There were Jeff Buckleys I never knew, the personification of Greenwich Village, Mr. Top 40, his life as a son, as a brother, a boyfriend, a bandmate, and creative partner. I knew a Jeff Buckley who came to Memphis to record an album he had no real intention of releasing, then decided to stay and rewrite the album. Jeff Buckley was a great guy, mostly sweet, often introverted, and a presence to be in. He shimmered, and you could feel it. To share his company was to be left with his presence. He was a work in progress, leaving different parts of himself with different people. and the sudden termination of this incomplete opus feels particularly violent. I think Jeff's inner rhythms changed while he was here. I think he heard different drummers in his head, and while he was here he had space enough to clear his head and unify their rhythms. The very thing that killed Jeff is what made him so vital. Most Memphians merely talk about their beautiful, terrible Mississippi River. A few visit the banks to contemplate its majesty. But visiting and looking and contemplating weren't enough for Jeff. He had to touch it, and fully clothed, no doubt strikingly, and wearing boots, he waded in further and further until he was swimming on his back and looking at the night sky. Jeff did not heed the exhortations to get out, and he probably was enjoying the sound of the tugboat that passed by and not thinking of the wake it created. He was singing Led Zeppelin songs.
I'm dialing the number of Mr. Jeff Buckley.
Jeff is on the telephone calling from a friend's house where he's had dinner
And so they've been having a very pleasurable evening, and we're at the end of that evening, and actually they don't have any more material to sing, and I thought maybe you might like to sing a song with them.
Oh, I don't know. How about I Shall Be Released? Do you guys know that one?
What key?
A. They say everything can be replaced, that every distance is not near. So I remember every face, of every man that put me here. Say, I see my light come shining, wow, from the west to the east. Oh, every day now, any day now, I shall be released. They're standing next to me in this lonely crowd. A man who swears he is not to blame. All day long I hear his voice shouting so loud, crying out that he's been framed. Oh, sing. I see my light come shining. What about the west to the east? From the west down to the east. And double F from you, yeah. Any day now. Music busted. Anyway now. Oh, I shall be released. One more time. I see my light come shining. From the west down to the east. Any day now, any way now, I shall be released. All right, y'all. Thank you.
Yes, lovely, Jeff.
That's cool, man.